Suicide Zen Forgiveness, the pod that shares the stories of those affected by suicide. Lost a loved one? Attempted it yourself? Did you know that when you share a burden, the load is lightened? Come listen in with your host, Elaine Lindsay.
Suicide Zen Forgiveness, the podcast, is for education only. Some of the subject matter could be triggering for those that are newly grieving or in a poor state of mental health. Please call your local suicide hotline or mental health office if you need immediate help. Hello there. It's great to be back. I'm Elaine Lindsay, and this is Suicide Zen Forgiveness. I'm excited to present to you a guest today who's actually in my local area. And there's actually quite a bit to say about my guest. I got to see and hear him at an event a few weeks ago called Dare to Be Vulnerable. There were a number of men who were CEOs and partners in huge companies, and they were, in fact, being real and vulnerable about their story. So, this is Kevin Ford. Let me give you a little bit about him. Kevin was named CEO of the Year by the Ottawa Chamber of Commerce and Ottawa Business Journal in 2017. and EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2019. Kevin Ford attributes his success to teamwork, integrity, and commitment. He's worked in professional services for more than 30 years, including 11 years at IBM as a partner in global business services. Kevin also contributes to numerous charitable organizations. He sits on the board of the Ottawa Hospital Foundation, and he's a member of CADC's Board of Directors since 2016. He served as chair of the board from October 2019 to April 2023. Kevin has coached hockey, and most recently, he led the charge to save a legacy live music venue here in Ottawa. Without further ado, let's welcome Kevin. Hello there.
Hello, Elaine. How are you today?
I'm great. It's good to have you here. And it's not often that I have someone who's actually local.
Yeah, I saw that in your introduction. I never think about these things when you get on these calls. The fact that we are physically in the same area and probably could have had a discussion as we did at the Dare to Be Vulnerable event. So great to do this virtually. Great to do this from this wonderful city of Ottawa, and on a cloudy day but a warm day in here in Ottawa. So we're always great to be talking to you.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And I will say the one thing that doing things virtually affords us is not sitting in traffic.
Oh, true. So good point.
It's actually good for the environment.
Good. I like it. You're absolutely right.
So I want to jump in and say, first of all, I thank you again so much, because I know that this is not easy. As my audience knows, it took me almost 60 years to actually open up about my story. So I can imagine what it is for other people. And I really appreciate allowing people to give us their story in their words. So I'm just going to let you take it away, and we'll take it from here.
Well, thank you for that. And, on the topic of suicide, it's one that has affected me personally. There's no question. I've lost both my father to suicide and my brother-in-law to suicide in his mid-30s, and my dad in his early 50s. And, so it's been a journey, and it's been interesting to see, those two suicides happened probably, over 20 years ago now. But there's not a day that goes by you don't think about it. There's not a day that goes by you don't think about, those that are challenged that maybe aren't getting help or can get help. And what I'm excited about is that folks like yourself, the Dare to Be Vulnerable panel that I was on, is that people are talking about this now. People are talking about it proactively and openly. So with specifically my story, start with my dad. I look back now, and it's clear that none of us knew at the time, but looking back now, and now with all this information available to us, it's clear he struggled with depression and anxiety. Like, it's very clear to me now. I think about the symptoms and the many attempts at suicide before he actually went through with it. I think about the emergency room visits with heart attacks, which were obviously anxiety attacks at the time, the drinking, the alcoholism. He was a really hard worker. He was a proud man. And this was something at that time, and this is probably mid to late 80s, that, nobody talked about. No way could he talk about it. And he came from a generation that probably was ashamed to talk about it. So having to watch that unfold and looking back now is like playing a movie over and over again in your mind. You see exactly what was going on. Anxiety. You see depression. You see no ability to cope, no ability to get help, and you see no ability to actually ask for help, because at that time, nobody talked about this. And my brother-in-law, Rob, my wife's brother, again struggled with anxiety and social anxiety, and used alcohol to try and cope. Great guy, just a great guy, father of 2 young children at the time that have grown up to be amazing kids. But again, never, I think, got any kind of formal help in a way of somebody sitting down and saying, here's what we can do to help offset some of the symptoms. So whether it was stigma, whether it was lack of education, whether it was lack of all of the above, I equated to the same thing my dad went to probably 15 years earlier. So my story is it's real. It's in the sense that I think about it. I think about them both a lot, and just hopeful that folks like yourself, folks like Susan, the folks that are trying to bring these stories, specifically for men and also women, obviously are affected by this. But for me, it's 2 men that saw no other option but to end their lives. So very sad, very, very sad.
Well, my heart goes out to you for both of them. I'm so sorry, because I totally understand. And I'm of the boomer generation that I actually worked at a place called Rideau Regional Hospital School. And it was a facility for mentally challenged people, but there was a wing that people found themselves who were struggling, who had psychoses, who, for whatever reason, went off the rails. And sadly, back then, so I understand your father, in that we didn't dare say you had weird thoughts or, God forbid, suicidal ideation. Because even in the schoolyard, when I was a kid, the line was, whoa, watch it, they're coming to take you away, haha. There was a song, for God's sake.
Yeah.
That was this upbeat, and yet it kind of that concept of the shame and the stigma, and be silent. You did not air your laundry in public. And men, for the most part, didn't show what was going on. My father's sister died when I was 7. To this day, we're not sure if she assisted herself. There was a domestic abuse situation. It was back in Scotland. I honestly didn't even know I had an aunt. There had been so much angst and trouble with her marriage, etc. She was older than my dad, and we were here in Canada. And it wasn't something that you put on your children. So they just didn't say anything. Which to me now, I find it bizarre. But I don't know about you, when you grow up in a household where there are, locked lips, and you don't air that laundry, you tend to have that inner think, oh, maybe I shouldn't say, maybe I shouldn't tell people, oh, I'm not gonna put that off on someone else. And unfortunately, that's why we're where we are today. Men 45 to 64 are one of the highest cohorts that we lose. And I know people, we're all very heartbroken when we lose anyone. It is a big deal when we lose children, and we do lose children a lot more than you'd ever realize from the stats. But what can we do to ensure that the children of your brother-in-law, you yourself, don't become a statistic?
It's a great question, because I watch, myself, my children, my obviously my brother-in-law's children, and there is a systematic element to this thing with regard to whether it's DNA or something, depression and some of these anxiety disorders. And I'm not a scientist by any sense of the word or a medical professional, but I see it. I see some families, it runs through the family, and it runs through generations, and it is something that, number one, I don't think, again, we've talked about more of that diagnosis at a young age, and we could move to treatment. We can move to treatment, but even then, capacities, is majorly challenged right now. So what can we do to stop this? What can we do to help prevent this? Great question. I think number one is, I think there just has to be communication, open communication to those you love all the time. And those you love may extend beyond your family. It may be your friends, maybe your coworkers, and maybe people that you value in your life, and just say, hey, how you doing? And after they give you the standard answer, I'm okay, say, no, how are you doing? Talk to me about how you're doing. Like, let's talk about physically, mentally, how are things going? Once you open the door with a question like that, it's amazing the responses you get back. When people think that you're authentically asking them for their thoughts on how they're doing, for that you care enough to say, no, I don't want the standard, I'm fine, it's nice, the weather, the standard elevator talk that we do for strangers, these are folks that are in your life and love them. So I think really asking them, how are you doing? And getting away from that, number one, and being able to listen is just so important right now. I did a town hall with our staff in the middle of COVID, and I just called a CEO town hall, and I didn't have any agenda. I said, it's a little fireplace chat. I'm just going to call it a fireplace chat. We're just going to show up, and we're just going to talk about how everyone's doing. And again, this was right in the middle of COVID. I was struggling because as a leader of a business, I had no tools in the toolbox to deal with a global pandemic in a virtual world. So I said, I just got to talk to somebody. So anyway, so I brought them on, and those that, it wasn't mandatory, those that wanted to join, joined. And we had a very honest discussion. When it was deemed that my question wasn't just a standard tick in the box survey regarding mental health, it was that I honestly cared about how people were doing. And I asked the question on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst you've ever been and 10 being the best you've ever been from a mental health perspective. Give me your answers. And people chimed into the chat, and the average was probably about 5 or 6. And my favorite was when somebody says, I'm a 6 faking an 8, because that's what happens with mental health, is that people try to put on this facade of, I'm okay, because I don't want people to say, hey, Elaine, how are you doing? I'm fine, but I'm having a bad day. I have massive depression today. That's not easy to bring up sometimes. So I think open dialogue, number one, Elaine, some questions that matter, and listening is probably the start of this. I think 2 is that the connection to healthcare professionals that really know how to deal with this in the context of diagnosis and treatment. I know Calian, our company's in the healthcare business, and psychological support, psychiatric support. It's hard because there is a massive capacity gap right now. We know that. So I think number one, if you can get some help, get the help. And whether that's you personally reaching out or having somebody facilitate that help on your behalf, I think that's important. Maybe it's a friend who's just going to talk through it while you can find, formal support. So listening, getting some support, getting some help in some shape or form. And then third, recognizing that this is not like a broken arm. This is not something that you go and get fixed and then you're fine. This is a lifelong journey. And I learned that with my dad, and I learned that with my brother-in-law. I learned that with myself. Part of my Dare to Be Vulnerable campaign was just, mental health is not a stop, it's a journey. And if you're feeling depressed or anxiety or have family that's, dealing with some of this, very rarely, I would say, I've talked to folks where they say, "Oh no, I'm fine now, and it's good. I never have a reoccurrence of this." It's going to be a daily discussion,
Yeah.
daily battle to deal with it. So just be ready for the marathon, not the sprint. Would be my third mindset. Third part response to your question.
That is such a good response, and you brought up something that's critically important. It is a marathon. It is not, the one and done, and oh yeah, I'm peachy now. You go in for 2 days, or you sign yourself out. In a lot of cases, people will, and it's, oh yeah, it's never going to happen again. That may happen in 1 out of a million cases, but for the most part, I think even people who are genuinely happy do have times where they despair. And it does not have to be a quantifiable, specific mental illness to cause you to fall into looking for a way out. Unfortunately, just because we are this soup of emotions, everybody can have those horrific days. And I have an idea that I want to run it by you, because to me, you brought up the fact that friends and family, and maybe a little farther around that. I would really like to put out a challenge to the people around you, the people around me, all those people that we care about, the people that we work with, all the people that are in our sphere. I would really like us all to take on one stranger. And I don't mean you have to follow them around or take them every day, but take the time. I don't know, once a week, once a month, if you're really busy, and talk to a stranger and really listen to what they have to say.
I love that idea. I love that idea because I think there's many that don't have that person to talk to. There's many that don't have that family, a friend or something. It may seem inherent to people to say, well, how can that be? Like, how can somebody not have a family member or a friend? Well, it's probably more occurrences than we think of, and it's sometimes there's broken families, sometimes there's folks. The challenge with mental health, and I've seen this before, and I continue to see it, is that somebody who has a mental health disorder or something that they feel that they're not right is probably the better term. Sometimes it builds walls between people. It builds walls in the sense that I think of some of the folks that I know that have very hard depression, and sometimes they just build walls around themselves because they just can't deal with it, and so they become isolated. They become just not wanting to talk to the world, and that's how they cope. And I get that. Like, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, by the way. I've never had it, but in the same spirit, I can understand it. So your idea of like just talking, that's what I was trying to do, I think, in some ways, and just trying to talk to my staff at one point. So let them know somebody cared. Like, somebody cared enough to ask the question, right? And whether it's me or anybody, I love that idea. And wouldn't that be nice if we all could go to somebody saying, how are you doing? And if you're not okay, I'm here for you. I'm here to talk about this.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful idea, Elaine. A wonderful idea. I love it. Absolutely love it.
I know it's a big ask. And I know that in a lot of cases, what you were saying is absolutely correct. People have built walls. I know I was one of them that had my walls up so high, I couldn't even see out. But for everybody else, if you do set out to once a month, I don't want to stretch anybody, but just taking that one stranger, give them 15 minutes of your time. It can be such an incredible gift because everybody wants to connect. Even those who say they don't want to connect, they want to know that their voice can be heard by someone. And very often, people won't take you farther than that. My husband says I'm quite strange. Okay, I've decided, I don't know, 30 years ago, I decided that no matter where I went, I wanted to be able to say hi to everybody that I passed. It's just I don't know. My mother said, "Oh my God, do you have to have the attention?" It was like, no, it's not about me. Because if you smile at someone, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they just came from a funeral home or they lost their dog or they don't have lunch or they don't know what they're going to feed their children that night. You don't know that. But if you walk by someone and you just smile at them or you take a moment to say something nice, it's like a gift from heaven for an awful lot of people. And it costs you nothing. Just a few seconds. And I know, I totally get that I'm super Pollyanna who believes that you just sprinkle a little niceness or whatever, that it's going to make a change. But if you think each of us takes that niceness and sprinkles just a little bit on one other person.
I think the idea, I think it's fundamental because it's, people that know me, I talk about positive and negative energy all the time. And this is the positive energy, right? It's just injecting that into somebody's life, whether it's a hello, a smile. He just said, "How you doing?" No, how you doing? It's such a small gesture, but it means so much to your point. And wouldn't it be nice if everyone just said every day, I'm going to make sure I make a point to say hi to somebody, ask how they're doing, and even if I don't know them, wish them a good day, or say, "Geez, you look great today," or
Yeah,
just something in the sense of just letting them know that they
they're
matter,
seen.
that they're seen, they're not invisible. Um, I think you're onto something there because for me, I thought about it a lot, even in my darkest days. Like how do you still be a positive leader? How do you still be a
Yeah.
positive friend, a positive partner to your spouse, positive for your children? And I've come to recognize it's a high standard to set for yourself that somehow or other you've got to be perfect and not, feeling the effects of the crazy world we live in, for sure. Um, but there is so much good, there's so much good going on that it never gets talked about. The world is tuned to a negative channel right now, very negative channel. That's what people kind of focus in on. And we need to rise above that and create a positive channel, a new station called positive energy that we can tune into. So your idea of make it simple, just talk to somebody, say hi to some stranger, be positive. I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. And frankly, it's a small gesture, but I think if everyone did it, imagine the effect it would have.
Well, I'm glad you're on board.
I'm on
Because
board. I commit
excellent,
positive
excellent.
energy injections every day to all my staff and
Oh,
all
I
my
love it.
people I
I
run in
love
the
it.
streets.
And it really does cost so little. And I didn't realize for all the time I was doing it, I was saving myself because being in a great deal of pain or being in depression or what have you, when you put positive out, those waves come back to you and you may not realize it, but it raises your vibration as well. To get a little esoteric, it's all about vibration. We're energy, so why not put out something great? Think of it as, you're banking little bits of positive energy for the days where you can't even help yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fundamental to me on how we interact, how we deal with ourselves, just positive about yourself, positive about your family, positive about your friends. It's easier said than done, big time. I get it. For a lot of people, it's really hard to see the positives when there is so many negatives. There's some dire circumstances. I totally understand that. And I don't want to downplay that at all. I get it. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if you knew who you could reach out to that could inject some positive energy, that can just listen? So injecting positive energy, listening, having the ability to listen and be honest with the question, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Be honest with that question. If you're not honest, don't ask the question, because people
Yes.
see through that. They see through that. How you doing? I'm fine. Okay, great. Let's go on and talk about the issue at hand here. So I think those are, it's little ingredients that we need, right? There's no silver bullet here. It's going to take all of these things to help here. And I remember when, anyone who's dealt with suicide in their family or friends, there's a moment right away, as soon as you hear this, you go through, what could I have done?
Yep.
What could I have done to prevent this? And of course, that's a tough burden to bear on yourself, where you're kind of, you go through that reflection. You think about the last interaction you had with the individual. You think about the numerous interactions before that. Did we see this coming? Could we have done something? Many times, no. Many times these things are not projected. It's not somebody talks about it. It's not somebody say, I'm thinking of killing myself. People don't say that. Unless they're really at that point that they're trying to get help and they recognize they need it. And it's a brave statement to say. So I think we all go through that. What could I have done? What could I have done? Like, oh my goodness. And that positive energy, come back to that. Can we be positive for those that are with us, and try and keep them seeing that in this crazy world. Like I said, it's a tough world right now. If somebody can inject some enthusiasm, some, hey, look at the sun today, isn't it amazing? Or just something that breaks out of this constant feed of negativity. I think it's massive. And I think, frankly, it's a small step, but I think it could be massive if everyone just actually adopted that as a behavior in today's world.
Absolutely. And to that end, for me, it's about normalizing the conversation, not just around suicide and ideation, but around the fact that everybody has bad days, and we have to stop hiding it from young people. Like, we have to normalize it enough that you could say to your child, Mom's just not having a good day in my head today. I'm just not feeling great. Maybe you could give me a hug. Something like that, rather than putting on a brave face and everything's peachy, because if push comes to shove and someone makes a plan and exits, that child is left wondering what they didn't do. And it wasn't about what they didn't do. But if we don't normalize this conversation, then we are going to continue to lose people the way we do, because no one is comfortable talking about it, and no one is taking the time to reach out beyond those that are our immediate import to us, and making sure that somebody else is okay. Because the old adages, it takes a village and all of that, they're true. We're not islands. We're not singular. We need to look at things a little more collectively, I think.
I think so. And I am cognizant of some of the concerns people have in saying things like, I'm considering taking my own life.
Yeah.
I'm considering that, because I think inherently with the system that we have in place today, a lot of people's concerns may be, more importantly, they lose their freedom Like if I get put into
Yes.
a hospital, committed, whatever the right words are these days, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to break that down, because I actually know of somebody who talked to me a couple of weeks back, a younger person, that talked about this journey that they were on with their family, and having this discussion at a dinner table once, and one of the family members saying, well, I'm going to call the cops, or, like, I'm going to call the police and put you in, like, and this was just somebody just trying to explain how they were feeling. And the reaction was, well, clearly you've lost control, and clearly you're not able to run your lives. So there is something we have to learn as society, that somebody asking for help, saying, I'm having this ideation, this thought process, doesn't mean they're incapable of running their lives. In some cases, absolutely, they may need to get, more firm support, if I can say it that way. I think the majority, if they could say that early in the process, could not feel threatened in that way. And I don't know how to break that, because it's unfortunate in many ways, because our system is wired that way right now. With the lack of capacity right now, you go from bad to worse to a point where you're ready to, you contemplate this. If we can catch people when they just start having these thoughts, when it starts becoming a thought process, how do we catch people there before they get too far down the stream where it's almost, they feel that there's no help, there's nothing they can do to get help. I am cognizant we've got some systematic changes that need to happen here. And again, it's going to be hard because of just the capacity challenges we're dealing with. I think anyone listening to this, your point on that positive energy, that's fantastic. The point on listening and really trying to, work with folks that may be feeling this way. Be their friend. Just be their friend. Just listen and be their friend. That's a start. The other areas, unfortunately, I think are going to take more time, but that's something you can control, which is something I always ask myself, what can I do?
Yeah.
Well, what I can do is be transparent. Hence why I wanted to be on Dare to Be Vulnerable. Let people know that even as a business leader, that there are moments that I would say mentally, okay, you need to get help, you need to do this, you need to get that throughout my career. And again, witnessing firsthand, on the sidelines of two people who did take their lives. There's no reason why both those individuals shouldn't be here today. There's no reason they shouldn't be here today. The challenge was they just could not ask for help before it was too late.
And I'm going to raise the stakes just a little here. Well,
Okay.
actually, that's a lie. I'm going to raise the stakes a lot.
Yep.
I think normalizing the conversation actually starts with talking to children about brains and the thoughts in their head. Because we all have, sort of positive thoughts, negative thoughts, the happy, I hate to use happy and not sad, but we all have the good and the bad thoughts that run through our heads, even as children. But we don't ever explain to children that everything that runs through your head, number one, is not necessarily real. Number two, is not true. And number three, you don't have to act on it. We've never, ever, in any course that I know of, do we show children or teach children how to maintain their own thoughts, how to work with them, and maybe increase the positive thoughts, how to be sure and take those negative thoughts to somebody who loves them so that they can work on that. But it boggles my mind that there are courses on everything out there, but we don't start with teaching children how to work the bits that are in us.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as you spoke, because you're right. I'm just reflecting here on, your schooling and you talk about the human anatomy. We talk about, at some point in school, you talk about human anatomy and you learn all the physical elements of the human body. But you're right, there is nothing that talks about, okay, let's talk about the mental health of this thing. Let's talk about the spiritual side of this thing.
Yeah.
And that's not a religion statement. That's more of a,
No.
your spirit, your beliefs. So I think you're bang on. I remember I was talking to a doctor once, and what he said resonated with me. He said, Kevin, I would love to start fixing the problem. I'm just so busy dealing with it right now that I don't have the time to break the cycle. And I think about that, whether frankly it's mental health, physical health. You see what's happening right now. I sit on a hospital board. Is that the system is just trying to keep up to demand with regard to helping people, fixing people.
Yeah.
It's not wired right now to prevent. And I know this doctor was very sincere when he said, look, I just would love to get this prevent. So what you said, so what does that take, Elaine? What does it take to say, why aren't we teaching mental health and curriculum in schools at a younger age when people can start understanding not just physical anatomy, but what makes up their well-being, frankly? I would say the same about financial health. I would say about the environment. I would say the same about the things that are many legs of a stool right now to be an individual on this planet. But if you started with mental health, I think, which is a very good one, how nice would it be to have your 6, 7-year-old or whatever come home and they'd say, hey, I just learned about mental health and what anxiety and depression is and how it's okay to feel this way. And I can talk about this, man, that would be so powerful. So yeah, you got my support. Absolutely, Lane. Let's go. Let's get that. Let's get this. Let's happening.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that because I kind of sat on this and it percolated. It's been percolating for quite a while, but I'm almost at the point where I think we need to start a think tank that's going to look at how do we deal with thinking and how do we deal with it from the time we're little. Because yeah, it's wonderful with our experience and our life experience and everything people have gone through. We do have things now and tools that a lot of us can use. Then it makes so much sense to me to equip them when they're little so that they don't have to go through this. I think the world is ready for big strides in change because so much, as you said, there's so much negative and there's so much. It's time for us to add lots and lots of the positive and aim for what can we do better so that we can empower and arm is not the word I want to use, but to enable the little ones to come at it with a much better understanding of themselves. The rest of it outside of you will come, but we need to understand who we are and how we function as humans. And I think that should start with our brain.
Well, I think we've just learned so much over the years and understanding, just what makes us tick, both in the spirit of physical, mental, all the things we've talked about today. It's pretty paramount. And you have to take a step back and say, well, it's that fundamental. Why hasn't it been changed? Why aren't we talking about this? I'm always amazed when I have these type of discussions. You just go, yeah, why aren't we talking about it? Like, what's the issue here? I would love for my child, when I have 4 boys, and if one come and said, look, I'm not right. Like, I don't feel right. Something's not right. And again, whether it's physical, mental, I just want to empower them to say that without feeling they'll be judged or in any way feel that somehow or other I look at them any differently. So I think if you're going to start something, you have my full support to say, yeah, well, let's start talking about what has to change, both in education, treatment, obviously. I think the positive change that you talked about with regard just to embracing positive energy in all that you do, and then talking to folks and letting them know that we care. I think Those are the small steps, but there has to be some fundamental systematic changes, I think, to truly address this challenge, this problem that we have right now, because these are good, these are going to help in the short term, but man, we need a bit of a reset here, because it seems that the gap only gets bigger. And I know before we came on, we were talking about some of the numbers we're seeing about certain demographics and the suicide rates and everything, and it's I think it's fair to say it's not getting better.
No, it really is not. Well, I think I threw an awful lot at you today. I really took in what you said at the Dare to Be Vulnerable event, and I knew that what you would have to say and the understanding of it all would be absolutely valuable for our audience and going forward. And I'm hoping that this won't be the last discussion that we have, Kevin, in terms of mental health, like suicide, ideation, and changing things so we can normalize conversations that are difficult.
I'm happy to. I think I'll leave with this, because I don't know how long these normally go, so I'm sure you're looking at the watch here. But from my viewpoint, I think I've recognized through the Dare to Be Vulnerable discussions and people that came and talked to me afterwards, and some people that reached out, the reflection I had on that town hall, that fireside chat in the middle of the pandemic, and then just my own journey, is we need to start talking more about this. This can't be a Monday morning, Monday afternoon discussion that we happen once every 6 months. It's got to be part of vernacular. It's got to be a bit more of a regular check-in, both with yourself and again, it starts with yourself and then works out from there. With our kids, with our friends, with our family. If we can remove that stigma, if we can have people think that they are cared for, loved, that we want to see them here, we obviously don't want to see them take their own life. I think that is just so powerful. And whether it's education, treatment, it all starts with a human discussion somewhere in that chain. It starts with a discussion. So let's agree. It can't be a one-time event. It has to do more. So long answer to your question, I'm happy to support this in any way, because I think frankly, it's overdue. It's time. I know we talked about men not taking this on. I know women. I know everyone's dealing with this. Let's help each other out. Let's help each other out. It's the best we can do. It's the least we can do. Help each other out.
Absolutely. I could not have said that better myself. I thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share your story and also to further the discussion that I think is absolutely critical. I've said before, and I'll say it again, I'm on a mission to end the silence, the stigma, and the shame surrounding suicide, ideation, and mental health. And that starts with us. It starts with me stepping up and doing what I'm asking others to do. And you can all check me on that. Be easier for Kevin because he's here in my city.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'll find you, Elaine. I know where you live. You're in Ottawa. I got it.
Yeah, I'm not too far away. So on that note, I say thank you ever so much to Kevin Ford for coming to join us. Kevin is the CEO of Calian here in Ottawa. And just so you know, Calian is on track to be $1 billion Canadian company, which I think is pretty cool. I'm Elaine Lindsay. This is Suicide Then Forgiveness. I look forward to seeing you again next time. And in the meantime, make the very best of your today, every day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe on your favorite service. Suicide Zen Forgiveness was brought to you by Truel Social Media, the digital integration specialists. Let them get you on page 1 in the search results.
And also by Canada's keynote humorist, Judy Croon. the motivational speaker, comedian, author, and stand-up coach at Second City. Elaine Lindsay's mission: end the silence, stigma, shame surrounding suicide, ideation, and mental health. Sharing stories of those affected by suicide, suicide loss, attempts, ideation, and mental health problems. Sharing your burden can lighten your load. We must normalize the conversation to make it easier for you to voice your pain and be able to ask for help. Reaching out to any other human being when you're in need of a listening ear must become the norm.